what does audit risk need to be? At an appropriately low level, right? We'll come back to that. I just wanted to keep it in your head though. Remember, this is a conceptual equation, so it's going to take a minute for all these pieces to fit in, right? So audit risk is a function of the risk of material misstatement and detection risk, right? Those two things are going to change audit risk, but we need to keep it at an acceptably low level. What two pieces make up the risk of material misstatement? Inherent risk and control risk. Does anybody remember the definition of inherent risk? Remember, it's kind of what's inherently risky about the business, right? The auditors assess this in the very beginning to see if there are ways that material misstatements can creep into the financial statements outside of internal controls, which is why they're separate. So the risk of material misstatement is made up of two parts, right? Inherent risk and control risk. Write this down. For the purposes of discussing this audit risk model, we're going to keep inherent risk constant. Right? They assess it. It is what it is in the very beginning. So if you think in terms of mathematical equations, think of this as always being a 1. It's constant. We've assessed it. It is what it is. Right? So you notice when we talk about the audit risk model, we'll start talking about audit risk, control risk, and detection risk from this point on, because we're going to treat that as a constant. Yes. You won't need it. You're not going to calculate or anything, even though the book illustrates it that way. We're going to think about it as a conceptual model. So you don't need it. Other than to know that the risk of material misstatement is made up of inherent risk and control risk. And earlier in the semester, we defined what inherent risk was, so you need to know that. But you won't have to substitute numbers or anything. No calculators on the test, right? So we broke down the pieces, but what is the risk of material misstatement? Like, what's the definition? Like, how would you understand it? Plain and simple. It's literally the risk that the financial statements have a material misstatement, right? You do need to know the definition of that. Hopefully, when you see the words, you'll know the definition. The risk of material misstatement is the risk that the financial statements have the risk that the financial statements are materially misstated. Okay? And it's typically assessed on both the financial statement level and the assertion level. Right? So auditors look at it at the financial statement level and the assertion level. Okay? So, next question. Risk of material misstatement is consisted of two parts, two components. What are those two components? Inherent risk, control risk. What's the definition of inherent risk? It's the susceptibility of an assertion to misstatement or fraud, right? It's basically the risk that a misstatement can creep into the financial statements aside from internal controls. What's the definition of control risk? What is that? It's a risk that the internal controls don't work. It's the risk that the client's internal controls do not prevent or detect a material misstatement in a timely fashion. The risk that the client's internal controls will not prevent or detect a material misstatement in a timely manner, right? So how does the auditor assess control risk? The whole internal control chapter. But the short of it is that they have to test controls. There's another conceptual part with control risk that control risk has to do with the internal controls of the client, right? If they are not working effectively, like let's say that Rutgers has an internal control policy or procedure that says to enter into the cafe downstairs, you have to swipe your ID card. To get out of the cafe downstairs, you have to swipe your ID card. That's the procedure they have. Well, When you go to open the door and the door opens without you swiping the ID card, that control is not working, right? It's not functioning. It's not operating effectively.